back to the Spector Creative channel. I'm your host, Toy Guru Neitlich, and if you couldn't tell from the opening of this video, we're going to be doing a He-Man video today, or rather a Masters of the Universe video. Shocking, I know. And obviously He-Man has had a lot of different versions over the years, some good, some bad, and some that just exist. And, well, the most popular version by far is absolutely the Filmation series. I guess you could maybe say the toy line, but as far as entertainment, the 80s Filmation series is burned into all of our subconscious and has become part of pop culture into itself. And when this Filmation series was on the air was when the toy line was really taking off. And by really taking off, I mean it was outselling Barbie and Hot Wheels. And to a lot of Mattel executives and people cross-functionally throughout the company, this was kind of a weird thing, because Barbie and Hot Wheels were used to being at the top of the ladder. And suddenly here comes this blonde barbarian that kicked them off. Well, the natural thing is, let's expand the brand. If it's doing really well, let's sell more of it. So the idea was, well, let's introduce a new character. Now, their first attempt at doing this was a young, hip, cool character that could hang out with He-Man in his off hours, but the test audiences didn't really like this, so instead they decided to just go with a girl and her pet unicorn, because, hey, what line doesn't need a girl and her pet unicorn? But this wasn't just any girl and her pet unicorn. No, this was She-Ra, Princess of Power, who was going to be the long-lost sister of He-Man and would have her own cast of characters, her own TV show, and this was basically justified because 40% of the people buying He-Man toys in 1983 were girls, which was pretty mind-blowing since Masters of the Universe was considered a boys' brand. And anyone who has a basic understanding of math knows that 40% is just a little bit over half of the people buying a brand. So, expanding and having even more female characters was felt to be the best way to continue the brand and gain a bigger audience overall. So, He-Man and She-Ra, brother and sister, not at all boyfriend and girlfriend, despite what a lot of people on the internet or people who don't know the show as well seem to think. They're not romantically linked at all. They're twins. They're brother and sister. You know, like Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker. They're related by blood. They may have not grown up together, but they're brother and sister. So they have adventures together, and they're not involved romantically, because that would be creepy. And hey, besides, she would get her own romantic adventures. Anyway, so like He-Man, She-Ra was going to follow the template that had already been created for an action-adventure show, namely an arch-enemy. And because there was no arch-enemy created for She-Ra, well, they had to steal one from He-Man. He-Man's new arch-enemy for 85 was Hordak, so Hordak was basically taken from being a He-Man bad guy to being She-Ra's arch-enemy, which is why he was in the He-Man line, but the She-Ra cartoon. And now She-Ra and He-Man were set to coexist. They were on separate planets, but again, they're not a romantic interest like Luke and Leia. I mean, they're a brother and sister like Luke and Leia, and they could team up together and fight crime. And they would go on to star together, actually, in several crossover holiday-themed specials. There was the ever-popular He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special and the less popular He-Man meets Arbor Day special, which wasn't really aired that many times. And like how He-Man had Battle Cat, his trusty steed, She-Ra had Swiftwind, her trusty unicorn steed, magic Pegasus. Alicorn! It's an alicorn. I've seen My Little Pony. And He-Man has an iconic weapon, which was known as He-Man's sword. Boy, they really needed a better name for that. Alright, well, She-Ra was going to have an iconic weapon too, and the idea was if she also had a sword, she'd be able to channel the power of Grayskull and do most of the things that He-Man could do. So, hey, brother and sister, and both armed with swords and not romantically linked, like Luke and Leia. Anyway, so two characters, two swords, seems like it's going to work perfectly. Well, like the great poet Swift says, one of these things is not like the others. And if you notice, while both He-Man's Sword of Power and She-Ra's Sword of Protection have similar powers, well, they can also do different things. And this was a source of both confusion and interest for fans over the years. Now, in Masters of the Universe Classics, which tried to tie a lot of loose ends together as far as the continuity, introduced the concept that Hero brought the sword of power, to Eternia. It had originally been forged by Trollins in the ancient times and was infused with the power of the universe, raw power. And this was kind of the secret of the sword. But how are there two swords? Well, the answer, of course, is clones.
Cindy the Clone!
And yes, I know people say clones are really exclusive to Star Wars or Weird Al Yankovic songs from the 80s, but cloning is something that's part of Masters of the Universe and has been there from the very beginning. In fact, if you look at some of the early mini-comics, specifically the often regarded Tale of Teela, which was one of the first issues in the second run, so that would be like mini-comic 5 or 6 for those keeping track at home, but still a very early one. In this comic, Skeletor clones the goddess, or the sorceress, in order to raise the clone to be his future wife. Not a very good plan, and kind of a creepy plan if you were going to ask me. Alright, well, the clone is saved from Skeletor, unfortunately not raised by him to be his future bride, and through a series of misadventures, Teela and the sorceress combine and then separate, and eventually wind up being two different characters because comics are weird. Yes, I stole that from another YouTube channel. What can I say? I'm a thief. Alright, so this was done to explain why Teela, the warrior goddess, as an action figure, actually represented two different characters. One with the armor, one without, because I didn't want to put out two female characters in the line right away, but that's a whole other video. Go see it on my channel. The Masters of the Universe Classic bios were designed to really steep deep into the lore and try to combine everything into one story that would basically justify the greatest number of action figures, because we were trying to sell them, because it was about capitalism and about making money. And with the idea that there were two babies now, when the prophecy was there was going to be one child, one born, well, now instead... twins! And because you had twins, you needed twin swords, so another sword was needed. Hence the idea that the Sword of Power was cloned and the Sword of Protection was created. And this did create some controversy. It was, different. It was, unique, but it based on established lore that cloning happened in the Masters of the Universe. But there was something different about She-Ra's sword, and that was that shiny, shiny blue gem that is embedded in it. Now, there's been a lot of fan theories over the years about the gem and where it came from and what it does and why it exists. And this was meant to be explained in classics, but we never got to that figure. It would have been explained in the Starburst She-Ra action figure bio, which was written, but unfortunately never released because we never got to Starburst She-Ra. One of the fan theories was that the Jewel of Protection was the jewel from Hero's staff. But this definitely is not true for a couple of reasons. And one, because the jewel was green, or at least the vintage figures jewel was green. When we did classics, we did multiple jewels in actually 3 different colors in order to do a chase figure. These were called spell stones, as explained in the opening to every single episode of He-Man.org's Roast Google Dinner. Go have a listen. It's a great podcast. So each of the 3 gems, green, red, and purple, could cast different spells. They're spell stones, and you insert the stone into the top of the staff to create a spell. So definitely not the Stone of Protection, nor could it be, because they do different things, and they're different colors. There's no blue spell stone, or at least there wasn't with the figure. We purposely did this in order to not create the rumor that the stone was related to She-Ra's sword. We wanted to sort of clear that up. So what is the stone? Well, it's the Stone of Protection. That's basically it. It's not a huge shocker. It was a stone that was inserted into the sword for 2 reasons. No, stop that. All right. Reason number 1 was to let her transform, but reason number 2 was it let the sword transform, something He-Man's sword couldn't do. She-Ra's sword could become everything from a space helmet, sure, why not, to a lasso, to a bola, not Ebola, Ebola, or an underwater helmet, lots of stuff. And this was basically what the gem allowed the sword to do, and He-Man's sword, not having a gem, didn't have this power. That's the explanation. That is the secret of the sword. Go check out that video by Toon Junka, and yeah, he goes through all the different transformations. And go watch The Secret of the Sword. It's one of the best 80s movies and animated movies done. It's awesome. Alright, so that wraps up this one. Please do share this video with others, and because it helps you tell YouTube to keep sharing with others. Like the video, subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff. But most important, leave a comment, because I comment back to everyone, and I love to keep the conversation going. What did you think of She-Ra's sword? Let me know below.